Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new series that I am launching. And this series is a very special series called Expert Interviews with Ken. This is a series where I basically interview other people who are experts in their own fields, whatever their profession is, and we get a chance to hear their story and what it is they're doing for people. So with that, let's dive into today's guest on Expert Interviews with Ken. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to yet again another episode with Expert Interviews with Ken. And today I have a special guest. His name is Steve. And Steve always knew that he wanted to be an attorney and, more importantly, to use that career to help people. While studying at Grand Valley State University, a volunteer experience with a nonprofit representing abused and neglected children solidified his passion for making a difference. He graduated in 2000 with a BS in public and nonprofit administration. Born with a birth defect and reliant on a wheelchair, Steve faced challenges in accessing law school. When Thomas M. Cooley Law School opened a satellite campus near his home, he worked towards a mission and began his legal journey in 2005. However, undiagnosed health issues forced him to pause his studies. Determined to stay engaged with his goals, Steve pursued an alternative path, enrolling in Kaplan University, now Purdue Global, in 2007 to earn a master's degree in criminal justice. Welcome, Steve. That is quite a story, my friend. And what I would like to start this episode with is simply I'd like you to unpack that. So maybe let's unpack your story further on how all that worked out and the challenges you faced in there, and let's take the conversation from there. So why don't you go ahead and just totally unpack your story?
Perfect. Sounds good. So I knew early on when I still in high school that I was going to be a lawyer. And so that was how I started out. When I graduated from there, I went to Grand Valley and got my bachelor's in public administration because everybody told me don't do criminal justice as a bachelor's because it kind of pigeonholes you.
Hmm.
So that's what I did. While I was there, I was able to do this really awesome volunteer experience for a nonprofit organization that did legal representation of children, and that took my goal. That was when it took off. I wanted to do that kind of stuff with kids. It just really fueled in me. Unfortunately, after I got out of Grand Valley, I kind of bounced around a little bit because there was no local campus at that point. I had to wait for them to bring the campus to a city because I did not drive due to my disability. I started there in 2005. I lasted one term.
Wow.
Flunked out, but found out that was because I had a learning disability that made me read really slow. Now, it's funny because I can read anything like for pleasure, like a book. It's easy, but it's the highly technical stuff. And reading legal opinions is highly technical. So, when you
Right.
get into doing that, it starts to be a problem. So between that and the fact that I had sleep apnea,
Oh,
I
man.
was when I would, or I should say, I have sleep apnea. At that time, it was uncorrected. I was not I would stop breathing 75 times an hour. So I basically was getting zero sleep. And so between the two, I flunked out. Went into I would call a moderate depression for about 2 or 3 days.
Mm.
Got some very good encouragement from one of my professors at the law school, encouraging me not to quit and to go back. Um, Unfortunately, in order to do that, I had to wait 2 years.
Right.
It's an American Bar Association requirement that if you flunk out of law school, you have to wait 2 years to try again. And so I decided, well, okay, fine. I can't go back to law school right away, but I can go get my master's. And I decided to get my master's in or criminal justice. I focused that all on juvenile justice. When I got finished with that in 2007, I then applied to go back, and it took a little bit of time to get all of that application process done. Or actually, no, I didn't. I finally earned my master's in 2009. And in 2010, I returned to Cooley and spent the next 4 years getting my Juris Doctor from there. And then I moved to Alabama and passed the bar exam.
Nice.
And the rest, as we shall say, is history.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Now, I know you've been, um, it's awesome that you finally made it, but from your journey, it sounds like you had quite a few loopholes to jump through, and you had quite a few challenges that you were facing through all of that, which kind of led to you, as you explained, it kind of led you down paths of depression, probably disappointment, like all that stuff, right? And then
Oh, yeah.
and then it sounds like you finally made it here. And so, how long you been doing this successfully so far?
Well, I've been a member of the bar since 2014.
Okay.
Um, Now, due to other health issues that began probably in really 2016, 2017, with because of my disability, I had pressure sores,
Mm,
and that led to problems. I had to take some time off to get that under control. And through that, my wife and I decided, me trying to return to work for profit was going to be a challenge because we never don't really know, from one day to the next when these health issues are going to crop back up and stop me from working again.
right.
So I basically made the decision to retire and pursue other uh, pursuits. And one of those pursuits that I am working on right now is to start a nonprofit organization that will solely represent children, both in child abuse and neglect proceedings and juvenile delinquency.
That is awesome. And how is that going, starting up that organization?
Slowly but surely, we've accomplished a few things. I've gotten about half of my board put together. Fundraising is going slow. I'm doing this purely from donation and what little bit I can contribute to it from my own pocket. And so that has slowed us down because in order to get uh, grant funding from the foundations, the government, you have to have your nonprofit tax status, which is called 501c3.
Mm,
And it costs even the short version, which they created back a few years ago, a streamlined version of it still costs $500 to file.
Wow.
And so, but we have a name for the organization. It's going to be called the Justin James McCarroll Children's Legal Advocacy Center.
Awesome.
And that is after my dear sweet nephew who left us in 2020.
Oh.
He had cerebral palsy from birth. And basically, long story short, his lungs finally just gave out. He could no longer breathe. And we as a family decided that putting him on ventilators and machines and keeping him in a hospital to try to keep him alive really wasn't a life for him. And so we took him home, or his parents took him home on hospice. And that decision was made in 2018. And he actually lived for about 2 years after that.
Wow.
But he was my buddy, even though he's actually my wife's nephew by blood. He's only my nephew by marriage, but he was my buddy. Even though he could not talk, we communicated with each other. And so I've decided to name the organization after him. There's actually a whole lot more that goes into that decision, but for now, that's the short version.
Right.
So we have the name, we have some board members. I have a GoFundMe that I'm using to try to fundraise. And as we gain donations little by little, we'll do the things we need to do. I told people at the beginning of this thing, it wasn't a race, it was a journey.
Right.
And so my goal, hopefully, is to, by the end of next year, or actually, no, I started in late summer, early fall last year. And so I guess when I said next year, I meant end of this current year. So the end of 2025, I'm hoping we'll have our 501c3.
Nice.
And then we can start writing grants and getting some real money in and open our doors and start helping kids.
Now, I have a curious question. So it sounds like you've been really at this for around 10 years or so, just really getting things going and stuff like that. And now you've got your nonprofit that you're getting started with. So you've been around this industry for a little bit, and you've seen firsthand the gaps in the legal representation for children. What are some of the most common failures in the system that lead to poor outcomes that you have personally seen?
Well, the main problem, and I'm going to speak from Alabama, but really
Okay.
most states do things the same way. So you can pretty much take what I say about Alabama and apply it to any other state. There is no uniform system for qualifying attorneys to do this type of work. Representing a child is not the same as representing an adult. The motto of my organization that we have adopted is children are not tiny adults. They're different. There's a whole lot you have to unpack about what's going on in their life
Mm-hmm.
to determine what the best outcome for them is. And that takes a specific type of qualifications. And unfortunately, the way most states appoint what's called indigent or poor representation, or my apology, I misspoke there.
No worries.
Representation for the indigent, for the poor, which children are inevitably poor. They have no resources of their own, especially if it's a situation where their parents are the ones being accused of abusing them. That would be their only resource. But the system for that largely is anybody that fits a minimum standard can apply to do that and get reimbursed for their time by the state of Alabama. And in the state of Alabama, a minimum standard is you have to have your license.
Mm-hmm.
You have to attend an 8-hour course on juvenile and child abuse law. And then once you do that, every year you have, well, actually, they just changed the law. Every 3 years, you have to redo the 8-hour. But in between, you can watch a 2-hour video, which is a session of the refresher course that's been videotaped. And literally, there's really nothing in there that makes sure that you actually watched it. You could just start it on your computer, walk away and do other stuff, and it sits there and plays.
Right.
And as long as you get to the end of it, you did it. There's no continuing legal education. We are required to do so many hours in total, but there's nothing specific to child abuse or juvenile representation. There's no caseload standards. So if an attorney is in private practice and they do this type of work, they can have a caseload of 50 other cases, and then say they've got 5 or 6 kids. Well, that's 56 total cases. And so there's a lot of well-meaning people who go into doing this, but they simply don't have the time and what they don't know.
Interesting. It sounds like, here's what I wrote down as you were talking, because it sounds like this is a system with no accountability. And it's no accountability for credentials, it sounds like. Because if you could pull up a video and just let it play in the background, and you get credit for watching it, even though you didn't watch it, you just pulled it up and just had it playing.
Well, actually, I slightly misspoke. Twice during the video, they do put up a code that you need to be able to put in at the end in order to receive credit. However, when that code comes up, there's an audio signal. It dings.
Right.
When that's happening, and you can go.
So pretty much the same thing, though. There's no accountability.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. I wanted to make sure that I was clear.
Right.
That they do make an attempt at accountability. Yes. A poor one, but it's still an attempt, I guess.
Right.
I'm trying to be fair.
I get it, but I kind of see that as sad because it's like you are representing children that don't have, it sounds like, really good representation. And what you are trying to build is an organization and a system that has real, authentic, good representation, is what it sounds like.
That's exactly what I want. And I want to also be clear about this. I recognize that the capacity of my organization is not going to be capable of representing every child.
Right.
But part of what I want to accomplish through this organization is to offer to other attorneys who are also trying to do this work.
Nice.
Services that will assist them in doing the best job that they can. We will come alongside them, look at the records for the kid that they're representing, tell them, you need to check out A, B, and C. You need to know these things.
So
you need
to sort of like a coaching program for coaches, if you will. Forgive the terminology there. And then it sounds like you would also have your own little certification for them. Here, you go through our system, you get our stamp, and then we'll come alongside you. We'll help you.
We'll be responsible for making sure that they know what they're supposed to know.
That's amazing.
And finally, there is actually a third component of what I want this organization to do. I want us to work at the local, state, and federal level to influence lawmakers to understand that the policies we have currently in place regarding kids and their representation, and not only their representation, but how we're handling them and how we're treating them in these systems has to change.
100%. From what I hear, it 100% needs to change.
Oh, absolutely.
And speaking on that, here's another question I have for you, which I think goes right along with that. What are the consequences of children not having strong legal representation? How does that affect their futures?
Well, this is not from Alabama. It's actually from, I'm trying to remember where Chris was from. I'm sorry, I cannot remember the state where this case actually came out of, but It was back in the late 90s, back when adult crime, adult time was a big mantra. Chris His name was Christopher Pittman at the time. He's actually changed his name now. But anyway, he had some problems and he had a chaotic childhood. Mom basically completely bailed out of his life.
Wow.
Dad was more stable, but still not the best. And to make a long story short, ultimately, Chris gets put on his grandparents, and they do the absolute level best that they can for him, but they really don't know what to do. So they take him to a doctor. He was having mental and emotional issues. And they take him to a doctor, and the doctor puts him on a SSRI medication.
Can you break that down for those listening that may not know what that is?
It's a medication used for depression. Often, it's the SSRI actually stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It basically serotonin is a brain chemical,
Right.
and I believe it's the one that's responsible for making you feel good.
One of them.
And it's one of them. And if you don't have enough, well, you just don't feel good. You don't feel like yourself. You have problems. Well, so this drug attempts to help you with that. However, the problem with these drugs as a class, they have not been widely tested on juveniles. And what we do know about them is that they can make juveniles suicidal or homicidal.
Oh, wow.
They can actually make some adults suicidal or homicidal, but they're more likely to make a child that way. Well, Chris was placed on one of these drugs by basically a general practitioner, family doctor type doctor who had no expertise in the area of psychology or how these drugs really worked. The doctor wanted to help the family out. They were poor. So he gave them a bag full of samples and wrote the instructions for how to give the medication to this 12-year-old child on the outside of the bag and sent them on their way.
Lovely.
Well, a few days, nights later, at choir practice, Chris is twirly in the pew and his grandparents are getting frustrated with him. And South Carolina is where this case came out of. It just popped into my head. The grandfather basically told them that when he got home, he was going to get his butt whipped. And so they take him home, put him in his room. He was paddled and sent to bed. They all went to bed. Well, Chris got up in the middle of the night, loaded a shotgun, and shot both of his grandparents dead.
Oh, my word.
He then proceeded to set the house on fire and attempted to run away.
Wow. That
Yeah,
from 0 to 10 and
like seconds.
right. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
yeah.
I
So
now see that's a plot twist for me because I thought you were going to say he shot himself. But no, he went far beyond that. He shot his grandparents and then
no,
tried
he
to.
went to the homicidal side of the thing.
My gosh.
Yeah, he in South Carolina, most states, if you commit a crime like that before a certain age, they have to have a hearing in the juvenile court in order to decide how they're going to handle you. And it's up to the judge. Well, typically, a lot of times, those cases, because of the gravity of the offense, they get waived into adult court. And that's exactly what happened to Chris. Well, from that point, the case hit the media, and these two civil trial attorneys from Texas, wanting to help, represented him pro bono at trial. Their complete entire practice was civil. They had no criminal experience whatsoever. The only person at the table that had any kind of criminal experience for the defense was the local counsel that was required because these two attorneys were not licensed in the state of South Carolina. So long story short, they put on a defense, but they completely blamed the drug Zoloft, which is what he was taking. I just
I was going to
remembered the
say
name.
whatever happened to the drug that caused them to do all that.
Well, the state brought in representatives from Pfizer, who makes Zoloft, who testified that there was no link between their drug and suicide or homicide.
Of course not.
So they totally linked their defense to Zoloft, and ultimately it didn't work. And he was convicted and was sentenced to do 30 years in prison. Now, because his attorneys did something they should not have done, which was anytime a plea bargain is offered by the state. Do you want me to go over what a plea bargain is?
Sure. Yes, because there's some
Okay.
people in the audience that may not know that. So go for it.
Okay. A plea bargain is when the state basically they recognize that even though they make all the evidence they need to convict you at trial, but they also recognize they don't have the manpower or the resources to take every case to trial. In certain cases, they will offer you a lesser charge but you plead guilty to that charge and there's no trial. You waive your right to a trial by jury and you plead guilty to the lesser offense. And for that lesser offense, you'll get a lesser punishment.
Right.
Well, the rules of professional conduct state that anytime a plea bargain is offered to an attorney, regardless of whether they believe from prior communication or reason that it will be rejected, they are required to at least communicate the offer to their clients. Chris's attorneys never communicated the offer to their client or to his guardian ad litem, which he also had because he was a juvenile. When that was found out, his conviction and sentence were thrown out, and he ultimately did accept a plea bargain to involuntary manslaughter and is a free person today.
Wow.
He did serve until, I want to say he got out in 2020. So he did serve about 20 some years in jail because this case was, I want to say 97, 98. And I think, I believe he got out in like 2020.
Wow.
He's doing well now, thankfully. But that case right there to me demonstrates
The poor
at a
representation and
maybe at a more extreme level than most, but demonstrates what can go horribly wrong if the right person isn't representing this child.
this is the problem you're trying to fix. Now, curious question. Why do you think there's such a shortage of actual qualified attorneys to represent children? Why is that? I mean, because like the system is screwed up and there is very few good attorneys out there to represent these children.
The problem is twofold. And this is another thing I hope to try to address through the last component of working with lawmakers. I want to work with lawmakers. I want to work with law schools to get better communication out into the arena of the law for up and coming law students that, hey, this is a viable area of the law.
Right.
That you can practice and do real good. Unfortunately, it's not widely communicated. It's not like it's not talked about in the same way as they talk about corporate law or tort law or even adult criminal law. That's one of the problems. The other problem is that you cannot, if you are trying to work for profit and make a living at practicing law, you cannot solely represent children and make any money. And the reason for that is because of what I stated earlier, children are inherently poor.
Right.
And so you are left with being paid by the state that you work in. And just for example, when I was actively practicing here in Alabama, I was in private practice for myself. I was what they call a sole practitioner. I was the only lawyer in my office. And if you walked in my door and said, hey, I need you to represent me on such and such a matter. When I opened my law office, when I, as they say, hung out my shingle and opened the door, I charged $150 an hour for my time. And I did not differentiate between when I was working in the office or if I was working in the court. You paid $150 an hour if I was working at my office, seeing you as a client or preparing paperwork for you, or if I had to go to court for something. It was the same price. When I represented indigent defendants for criminal cases in the state of Alabama, and that included when I was representing juveniles in juvenile court or their parents in child abuse matters, I was paid $70 an hour. And there was generally a cap on how much I could earn.
Lovely.
What that means is that, and I believe the cap was $3,000. So what that meant was, regardless of how long a case took, no matter how many hours I spent on it, when I reached $3,000 in billing, that was the most I was going to receive. So that creates two problems. One, you are incentivized because of that to attempt to achieve a result, because you're not paid until you get to the result. You are incentivized to achieve that result as quickly as possible. And secondarily, how do I say this? If you had a choice between working on, if you've got two cases, you've got two clients that you've got cases for, and one of them is a private paying client paying you $150 an hour, and one of them is an indigent client paying you, who you're being paid $70 an hour with a maximum possible output or input to your income of $3,000. And I'm making no judgment here, just simple human nature. Which of those two cases are you going to work harder on? In a perfect world, you would say you would work as hard on both. And honestly, that's how
I was going to say that's kind of a difficult decision, because on one hand, you're kind of forced to work quickly. On the other hand, you're making more money per hour, which gives you the ability, you're making more money per hour. It also gives the opportunity to provide higher quality work. That's the way I'd look at it. That's the way I'm seeing it.
Right. And like I said, I wasn't passing any judgment on that. It's just, you got to be able to pay your bills.
Yes, absolutely.
And so and also the other thing that actually I just thought of, knowing that going in, you may want to represent those children. That may be where your heart lies and your passion for the law is. That may well be. But if you're forced with making the decision of, do I do what makes me happy and where my passion lies, or do I do what keeps my door open and pays the bills and food on my table, which am I going to do?
Right.
And so you're not the best and the brightest.
No. What would you, in here, the last question that I want to ask you in regards to this, what would you say to attorneys that really want to represent these kids, but they're seeing the complex situations of it, they're seeing the complexity of the entire thing, and they're hesitant to take on these children because of the complexities? What are things that you would say to those particular attorneys that really want to help and make a difference, but they're hesitant towards it? What are main things you would say to them to push them over the edge and make them jump in?
First and foremost, I would tell them they can make a difference simply by making their voice heard. Contact their legislators and their representation, and let them know what the problems are and what needs to be fixed. Because I guarantee you, Ken, I look at this as an Alabama perspective because that's where I am. Mm-hmm. This is not an Alabama problem. What state do you live in?
California.
Okay. It's not California. I guarantee you California has a problem with it, but it's not just But it's
I
not just a California problem.
I'd be willing to say California's probably got the worst problem from what I know about California. Let's not get into that. But okay,
But
go
it's
ahead.
not just a California problem.
Right.
It's not just an Alabama problem. It's a nationwide problem.
Yes.
And so every state needs to be working on this. My goal ultimately is to get this organization going really well in Alabama, take it statewide in Alabama, and then work with attorneys in other states and get it going in California, in Florida, in
Right.
Pennsylvania, in Michigan.
So what things that you would say to an attorney or a lawyer
So that would be
that
my
is
first thing I would say.
okay.
The second thing I would say is you don't have to do it full time to make a difference.
Mm,
That's where my passion is. And because I have the luxury of being retired and not needing to make money, I can do this nonprofit and I can do it full time, but do what little bit you can. Even if it's one case, that's one kid that got saved because they had a better, more qualified. What I would say to law students who are looking at going into law school and who have an interest in this area, geared your elective coursework towards children's law topics. That will help you when you get out and be able to do this. If you don't have a lot of that area, create a student organization like I did when I was in law school to get a better curriculum in law school for this area of the law. So that's for law students. Back to practitioners. When you do your continuing legal education, don't just do the minimum. There are lots and lots of free seminars out there. I belong to an organization called the National Association of Counsel for Children. They put on seminars all the time that are either free or very low cost, a lot of them web based. So you wouldn't even have to leave your office. Don't just do the minimum. If you really want to learn about this area of the law, there are opportunities out there for you to better yourself and to make you a better attorney in this area. It can be done. I'm an optimist by nature. And I have to believe that the system we have now, as flawed as it is, can be fixed and turned into something that we can be proud of,
mm, amen to that.
that will serve our children. Because really, what ultimately are our children? They're our future.
Heck yes. Yes.
We are going to leave this country to our children.
I'm drinking coffee to that.
Well, there you go. So, and anybody, I've given you a couple of ways for people to contact me. I
Yes.
welcome people to email me. And then from there, maybe we can exchange phone numbers. We can talk on the phone. I will talk to anybody who's interested in this area. That's how passionate I am. That's how much I know and in my bones feel like this has to change.
It absolutely has to
We
change.
cannot continue on the road we're currently traveling down.
Right?
It's not, no, we
It just
can't.
it can't be that way anymore.
We're throwing kids away left and right.
Yep. So, with that, you guys, he just gave you the invitation right there. All right. So, below this video, in the description below, is going to be his entire bio, as well as two links that he's provided where you can actually reach out and connect with him. And I would encourage you, reach out and connect with this guy, Steve, because you know something? He's making a difference here. He is really trying to make a difference in a broken system. And seriously, towards the end there, Steve, as you were like kind of like talking about how this needs to be changed, but I kind of like envisioned behind me an American flag like going down, and like in celebration, let's give the power back. Let's give the power back to our children and these, these people that are, what's the word I want to use? That are disempowered.
Yeah.
And so you guys reach out to Steve. Um, there are two solid ways you can reach out to him. And so, with that, before we conclude today's episode, I've got a couple announcements for my listeners here. So first of all, if this is your first time and you don't know me, and you've never heard of me, my name is Ken, obviously, and I am a weight loss coach. Mastery Weight Loss is actually my brand. Weight loss the way it's supposed to be. So I've lost 62 and a half pounds and I've kept it off for going on actually 7 years now, all without a diet, having that be sustainable. And that's exactly what I teach my clients, each one of them, how to do. I am unapologetically faith-based, and I have a global client base. And I have developed a mini educational boot camp where it's 3 one-on-one sessions with me. I'm giving away my 3 top secrets to help you break free from sugar addictions, hunger issues, snacking issues, even emotional eating, lose that last 20 pounds or 30 pounds, whatever that is for you. All of it, all in 3 one-on-one sessions with me. You will be equipped with an empowered mindset shift. You are going to be equipped, number 2, to see past the industry lies and avoid the common pitfalls. And number 3, you will be equipped to see past the marketing deceptions that this industry uses. They put it all over their packaging. You're out there actually making the heartfelt effort, thinking that you're purchasing healthy foods. Chances are you're buying into marketing deception. I help you to see past all of that and come out on the other end of that boot camp standing on a ground where you've got more freedom than you ever had before with your food choices because you see past this industry. All in 3 one-on-one sessions with me. That boot camp, that educational boot camp, has been valued at $1,500. I am giving it all away for only $97. You've got nothing to lose but those extra pounds. You've got everything to gain in the right way, in an empowering way, in a freeing way. So also below this video, there's a link to join that boot camp. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it at $97. I've already raised it once. Over the holidays, it was $75. Now it's $97. You want to get in, lock that price before I raise it again. So with that, you guys, do you have any last minute thoughts, Steve, before we pop off this interview?
Well, actually, I'm going to put in a plug for you. I'm actually going to get into uh, your mastery weight loss class here, hopefully real soon.
Awesome.
So you've made me a believer just in what little we've talked about this, and
Thank you.
so I'm going to give it a shot.
Amazing. I look forward to walking with you through that and working with you for sure, Stephen. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for that plug, by the way. Appreciate it. All right, you guys. Well, have a great rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are in the world and what time of day you are listening. And I will talk to you on the next expert interview with Ken. Talk to you guys later.